reclaim another chocolate bar, and so on and so forth, okay? So here, to be equally, or self-organizing network that learns actually through its neighbors. So here, what we have here is that a given cognitive radio will exchange information with its neighbors and tell the neighbors, this is what I got, so try to, did you get the same as me? Are you getting more than me, etc.? And they auto-regulate. So the whole network actually will be actually self-organizing. We have here primary users, we have secondary users. Every node will learn about the presence of the primary users. And at the same time, they try to share the spectrum as the spectrum evolves. So the primary users, they get in, they get out. They use the spectrum, they release it, etc. So it's a very evolving process, and it's actually a whole network that evolves and learns, little by little. So here the scheme that we call actually local control scheme. So here you have the sensing input, which means that every node will sense its environment, and you will get information from each environment. You have a process for spectrum sharing. So this is an algorithm actually that tries to incrementally fulfill the fairness rule. And then you have an output which is actually the result of, or the recommendation for which channel that particular node will get. And then we have a loop, and that loop actually is the information or the result for that particular cognitive radio node that gets in, and then it gets again into the system, compares the data that comes in, and then makes a result. For example, one example is, for example, a node that doesn't have anything, doesn't have any spectrum initially, okay? So it will have information about the sensing information from its neighbors. Okay, and it's also its own sensing, okay? The output, of course, the feedback is nothing because it doesn't have any spectrum. And given the input that it gets from its environment, it will select one unavailable spectrum. Okay, now it has one spectrum, one channel, sorry. Once it has one channel, it gets this feedback here. It gets the sensing input. For example, the input tells that, well, there is a neighbor which doesn't have any channel yet. You have one, but your neighbor doesn't have any channel. So the output here will be 0, will be nothing, because it will wait till the other neighbors have been have been happy with what they got. Okay, so this is actually very. Or a mechanism which is actually very efficient, and it can provide actually very important results in terms of fairness. So what this local control scheme, it's a consensus-based, okay? It means that every node will make consensus, okay? It will not be selfish. It tries actually to make a good compromise actually with its neighbors. So cognitive radios make decisions individually based on environment awareness. They can benefit from low computational complexity, and they have a low communication cost. Okay, they simply communicate with the neighbors, but propagation of information from a neighbor to another actually is it can be very, very efficient in this case. Okay, so this is actually the protocol. It's the one that has been adopted. Actually, it's not very complicated. Later on, we'll talk about RTS and CTS. I'll just talk about it later on in a few minutes. Getting information from the neighbors. And then here, simply, it's a very simple protocol. Actually, it's not very, very complicated to ensure fairness. Okay. So here I will give an example of a network. So what you have there, you have a network, and initially its node will have its own set of spectral or its own set of channels. Okay, as you have here, this is the initial network. Okay. So it's randomly deployed. here we assume that total number of available spectrum bands is constant simply because there are some theoretical analysis which requires that, but this is not a must. The protocol can work, but for the analysis, oh, it's working. Actually, it's working. Okay, so it works just to make things okay, so initially the spectrum bands are randomly distributed network for each iteration run. Darkness of the nodes initially. So here, when you see a dark point, it means that the node has more spectrum, allocation than the others. Okay. Of course, here the metrics that we have the convergence. The algorithm has to converge rapidly. We should not fall into the case where we have large networks and then we never reach stability. We never reach fairness. So it's very important that in a very small number of iterations, every node in the network will be happy, and every node will be allocated a set of channels in a fair way. And also fairness. Okay, we have to make sure that the goal in terms of fairness has been reached. So here, look at the results. We have here the time, okay, in terms of iterations, and then here we have the allocated or unallocated spectrum bands. Okay, so what will be the number of spectrum bands that have not been allocated? And of course, the optimal way is that you have a number of spectrum bands. The spectrum bands have to be allocated to every user in the network in a fair way, and no spectrum band will remain unused. Okay, so we reach fairness, we reach convergence, and at the same time we make full use of what we have available. Okay, so you see here the algorithm converges really very quickly. Okay, it converges very quickly, which means that the nodes actually have been allocated to all, or the channels have been allocated to all nodes in the network in a fair way. There is another algorithm, a couple of other algorithms to which this protocol has been compared, and you see that these protocols need much more time to converge. Okay, here you have in 6 iterations. The protocol has already converged. Okay. Here, actually, we have defined another case where we have a group or 3 groups of fairness. Okay, we have group 1 that needs. I think group 1 is the one that needs. If you have fg equals 1, sorry, here fg equals 1, it means that we have a case where all nodes have to be equally treated. Okay, even so the spectrum has to be evenly distributed among them. fg2, we have only 2 categories. Okay, some nodes have high bandwidth requirement, and others have low bandwidth requirements. Okay. And then fg equals to 3, we have actually 3 groups. Okay, we have one group that needs a low bandwidth requirement, another one a medium, and then another one which has a high demand in terms of bandwidth. So you see in the 3 cases, the algorithm actually converge very, very well. Okay, very quickly to their in about 6 or 7 iterations. You see also if the number of groups increases, the fairness becomes more difficult to establish. Okay, why? Because we have a lot of criteria to fulfill, and also there are these constraints within the groups that have also to be fulfilled. okay? But at least the algorithm actually converges pretty well. Now, if you see, in terms, I think you don't have a good display here. Okay. I think the PDF would be better, but okay, I'll look at the PDF just because it's better in the PDF file. Okay, it's the same file, okay? So here, there are two protocols that have been compared. The one, the consensus-based local control scheme, and another protocol that exists in the literature that actually does not take into account that local control, okay? It just makes it in a different way, but it's not based on local control or distributed knowledge. So as you see here, you have the spectrum band index per cognitive radio, which means that how many bands have been allocated to the users, okay, to the cognitive radio users. And then here you have the distribution. It's actually the probability distribution or the histogram of the spectrum bands. So you see that the groups that have been obtaining 10, here we have actually the number of nodes is 200. And I think, and this is the percentage, okay? Which means that about 97 or 95% of the nodes, they have been allocated 10 channels, okay? So which means that 95% of the nodes, they have been equally treated by having access to 10 channels. But there is a small percentage here in black, a small percentage like probably 2%, they got 9 channels, okay? So it was unfair to them to have 9 channels, and the ones that have been, but the majority is happy, okay? And between 9 and 10 is not a big difference, okay? So the standard deviation is really, in this case, is very, very low. But look at the other algorithm. The other algorithm is completely unfair, okay? There are about 15% who got 4 channels, another 12% who got 5, another 20% probably who got 6 channels, etc. And then probably here 20% who got 10 channels. So it's not really fair, okay? Because the system was not able actually to update itself and learn from the environment, be aware of itself, and then this local control loop which is working. Okay, so do you have any question about this diagram or remarks? Yes?
So it's clear that it's theoretical to use cognitive radio and etc. and use reconnaissance like small sensor relays. But it consumes the battery power. So how to manage the trade-off between power and cognitive?
Yes, yeah, it's actually the whole issue in sensor networks, and so we try to manage power, which means that we try to have to extend the lifetime of the network, and to provide spectrum access with the highest possible bandwidth. So it's a whole. So the whole thing is about that. Okay, so we are trying to address this problem through different angles. Okay, both power and spectrum. Yes. Yes.
What about the overhead caused by the information exchange?
Yes, this is a good question about the overhead. So we'll just talk about it right now. Okay, we'll talk about it. So actually, yeah, we can just answer this question very easily. So actually what we have is simply the nodes, they exchange some frames. Did you hear about RTS and CTS before? Okay. So RTS is request to send. And CTS is clear to send, which means that actually two nodes, okay, if they try to communicate with each other, they have this handshaking, okay? So the first one sends an RTS, okay, and the second one, if it is available, replies by a CTS, okay? So actually, this protocol will use a field in that RTS-CTS exchange, okay, frame. In the frame, this is the RTS. So it's piggybacking. Did you hear about piggybacking? Okay. It's simply when you carry a baby. When you carry a baby, the baby will have a free ride. Okay, that's what we call piggybacking in here. Which means that the information that was sent about the spectrum goes for free. Okay, so we don't actually spend any overhead except to plug in the bits inside the frame, which means that this one sends an RTS anyway because it's trying to send. So we exploit that RTS frame to put information about the available spectrum and what kind of channels have been used by this node. Okay, and this one also will have so this information will have a free ride. Okay, in the RTS it will be sent for free, and then the CTS, when it's sent back, the same thing, we use a free ride, free feed in the frame. Okay. So the computation complexity, of course, needs to be studied, but there are areas, like in this case, where actually we send information without consuming any bandwidth or power. But of course, you have the control loop, so you have a processor inside each node that actually runs that algorithm. So the algorithm has to run. Okay. So any other questions here? Yes. Yes, it's a true issue. So there should be an understanding agreement between the users that they have to share information about the spectrum, etc. Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah. Yes.
I just want to ask about the simulator that has been used to evaluate the problem.
Yeah, this one actually used MATLAB. Okay, it used MATLAB because it has programmed everything. And we need to have everything transparent and clear so that we can study all the things.
How modeling the primary user profile? How primary users are accessing to their spectrum?
It's a random process. I think we'll talk about later on. Yeah, Poisson. I will talk about the mathematical models. Okay. So here you have another case where you have one group. Again, you have one group of fairness. So again, here the majority of the nodes, they got 10 channels in the case of this protocol. But a minority, they just got here 6, and here 5, and total number is 350. It's another case. Here where you have actually two groups. You have, in this case, you have two groups. So one group got how much? 6. Got 6, yes. And another group got 3. Okay, so it's fair. But the other algorithm actually allocated part to this one, so it's more or less fair. But there is a group who got 2, and there are other groups who got a small number compared to this one, etc. So it's really unevenly distributed even within the groups. Okay, normally we should have the best way to we should have actually 2 groups if we have 2 different quality of service requirements. Now, if we have 3 groups, okay, we have one group, 1, 2, and 3. So the protocol was able to allocate here 2 bands to this group, 4 bands to this group, and 6 bands to this group. You look at the other protocols, but the group protocol was not fair. Okay, you have some differences in terms of allocations. Okay, so we move on to the slides now. So do you have any questions so far about this fairness problem? Any questions about fairness? Yes.
You are asking about fairness, but there is another, I think, another performance parameter that is scalability. So, can you assess the scalability of your protocol?
Yes, it's a good point, and it's, I think, in a good research topic. It's a good question. How can this be? So it's really a very recent, problem, and of course, scalability is a true problem to be considered. So we are actually getting information real time here. Okay, it's really very fresh, and I will show later on the references about this. Okay, but there are many. It's a very rich area. So many areas to explore there. Any other questions before we go to the next one? But you can still ask questions later on if any idea comes up about what we have covered. So here the medium access challenges. What are the medium access challenges? We have, first of all, to use the spectrum bands with improved throughput. We have to avoid interference with primary users. Involve spectrum management modules. And provide compatibility between all users. Because we are actually in an ad hoc environment. So it's really very difficult to manage compared to just one single user communicating with a single user, probably with the presence of primary user, but that's it, okay? And then we have another problem with the primary exclusive regions, because in some protocols, and due to the level of interference, the primary user has a perimeter. I will show it later on. Okay, it had a radius where actually no cognitive radio can transmit because it will be too close to the primary user. It will cause too much interference. Okay, when the primary user is transmitting in the underlay case, then that can be very big issue. But of course, I will discuss this later on. Okay, so here I will go back to the hidden and exposed terminal problem. This is also an issue of ad hoc network. So here you have what we call the hidden problem, which means that A and C are hidden terminal when transmitting to B. For example, B is here, A is here, and C is here. C is not in the range of A, so when C transmits A, we will not hear it. And the same thing, A is not the range of C, so they don't hear each other. So when they transmit, they will transmit simultaneously. Okay, they will transmit simultaneously, and it can cause, interference in B. Okay. The second problem is the exposed problem. Okay. B and C are exposed terminals when transmitting to A and D. So here actually they will actually interfere and they will cause some problems to the users. Okay, so to resolve this problem, we have this RTS CTS handshaking, which is actually very efficient. So for example, here in this case, D is not in the range of A, okay? So what will happen is that A will send an RTS request to send to B, okay? So every node in this vicinity will hear that A is trying to transmit, okay? So in that case, they will actually refrain from transmitting, okay? So this is collision avoidance. Okay, so we avoid actually. We try to avoid collision if we, apply this procedure. So again, here the spectrum is available to every node. Okay, so every node will have access to the spectrum. So they sense the channel. Okay, and then if the channel is empty, which means that there is no cognitive radio users using it, then they will have access to it. If it is being used, then they will refrain from transmitting. So how to do it? If D, for example, is far away, so even if D actually senses the channel, it will actually not hear that A is trying to transmit. Okay, so in that case, it will cause some, problems to B. It will cause interference to B. So if A sends an RTS, B will reply with a CTS. So D will hear the CTS, but it did not hear the RTS. What D will do, it will understand that actually B is receiving something, okay? And B is at the range of D, and therefore if D transmits, it will interfere in B. In that case, D simply refrains from transmitting. So this is the handshaking procedure, which is actually very important in this case, okay? So medium access, the MACA protocol, it's medium access with the collision avoidance protocol, okay? So here, if you look at the frame structure in the medium access, here this is the classical CSMA protocol. So in this case, we have the data. So A sends the data. It receives actually an acknowledgement. Okay, and then you have all the backoff. I think yesterday it has been covered somehow. So here we see that the channels actually, when they sense the channel, for example, B here has sensed the channel, but it figured out that A is already there. So it will refrain from transmitting. So it will wait. It will wait for a couple of. It will just make a backoff here. Okay. It will make for an idle. It will make. Just wait for the channel to be idle, it will back off and then sense the channel again, but the channel actually here is occupied by C. So we wait again, etc., till everything ends, and then it will be able to transmit. Okay, so this is the classical procedure. We have also what we call the network allocation vector. I think the students who studied MAC protocols, they know that, which means that if we hear the RTS CTS exchange, we will estimate how long it will take for that frame to be transmitted, and then each node will allocate a NAV, network allocation vector, so it will refrain from transmitting or even sensing the channel because it knows that there is something going on between two transmitter and the receiver, etc. And then here we have, again, this is classical 802.11 MAC. You have actually different timing. Okay, So which means that after a given acknowledgement, there is a short interframe spacing where actually the control frames can be sent here, okay? Control frames or next fragments can be sent. And then here you have another time IFS, actually where actually high priority frames can go in. And then we have the DIFS here where actually the regular data frames can be sent. Okay, so this is the MAC structure that gives priority who goes first. If, for example, there's time elapses, no control frames, then a new node can transmit a completely new data frame. Okay, now if there are low priority frames here, for example, data which is not urgent, or a frame which is, or even a control frame which is not really very, very necessary. In that case, it's low priority, so the node will not transmit right away, but it will wait for all these times to elapse. And if nothing will, or no node will transmit, then the low priority frames will be transmitted. Okay, so this is in 0802.11. Now the problem is that that's not enough, because in CRAN, in cognitive radio ad hoc networks, we have the problem of spectrum. Spectrum is not available everywhere. And then we have also the problem of interference with the primary users. Okay? And we don't even know about all this information. So we have to manage that. Okay? So here we have the exclusive, the primary exclusive region, which can actually pose some problem. So the primary exclusive region, you have here a primary user. You have a primary user in the middle. So the primary user will set to itself a region R0 with a radius R0. It will not allow any user or cognitive radio user to transmit there, because it will cause too much interference. Okay? So it sets that rule, nobody will transmit, okay? So the problem, sorry. Okay, the problem is if, for example, you are relaying information from A to B through multiple hops, and some of the hops are in the primary exclusive region, okay? In that case, your communication will interrupt, okay? So this is what you have here. So, so we are actually trying to transmit from source to destination over multiple hops. So normally the frame will go through A, B, C, D, and E, but actually B, C, and D are in the primary exclusive regions from PU1 and PU2. Okay, so in that case, the communication will not go through, and the protocol has to avoid this kind of situation. The protocol has to find other nodes somewhere else to communicate. So here the problem comes from the fact that there can be many possibilities. It can be, for example, that primary users just showed up, they were not present, just have shown up. It can be, for example, the fact that the relays were far away, and then they entered into an exclusive region, okay? Without knowing it, they simply, because it's a car or it's a mobile user, they just enter the exclusive region. So it has been relaying information from source to destination, and then suddenly they went into an exclusive region, okay? So the communication would be lost, okay? So that's actually a very challenging problem. And at the same time, all the nodes have to update their information about the availability of the channels, because even the channel is, as I said, it's a cognitive radio channel, so it belongs to primary users, so it has to be sensed and checked everywhere. Okay, I think that's, sorry. So the primary exclusive region actually has an impact, obviously. So if you look at here, this is the radius R over R0, so the radius of the total region divided by the exclusive region radius. And here you have the total throughput, okay? So as you see here, when the exclusive region is small, which means R0 is close to 0, oops, sorry. So when R0 is close to 0, your throughput is increased, okay? Here it's the same situation, but the parameters have been changed. So your throughput is highly increased if your exclusive region is close, is smaller, which makes sense, okay? So here there is a protocol that is called actually mobility aware medium access control protocol. So this protocol actually takes care of the fact that the nodes are moving, okay, and that there are primary users, okay. So what happens in this case is that we have this piggybacking that I talked about, okay? So imagine you have, for example, this configuration. So one is trying to send to 6, okay? But 2 and 1 are not aware of that, okay? So, so when one sends an RTS, it will send all its information about the availability of the channels, okay? And the channel it will be using, okay? Oh, that's actually, I think it has some problem, this one. Okay, so when one sends the RTS has all the information about the available channel and the channels that will be used for from 1 to 6. Now 6 will reply with the CTS, okay? The CTS also will contain all the information that 6 has got about its environment, okay? So then after that, which does not actually exist in 802.11, is that one will send a CTS, acknowledgement of the CTS, okay, which does not actually exist in C. This is an additional improvement of the protocol, which actually in the ACTS is an acknowledgement, and also it tells about the availability of spectrum, and also if there are any users around, etc. So in that case, at the last exchange here, in the last exchange, all nodes are aware of what's happening, okay? All nodes are aware about the channels available, the channels that will be used, etc. So if there is a problem of exclusive region, if there is a problem of mobility, they will take that into account, and they will route information to the nodes that don't have the problems of the presence of primary user. Okay, so the protocol here has a frame format. You have, for example, here you have the transmitter spectrum sensing. You have the receiver spectrum sensing, contention window, etc. So here the whole protocol has been designed and implemented corresponding to a given frame format. Okay. Now about the traffic models. I talked before about this question. So the primary users and the secondary users have a Poisson distribution in terms of traffic. And also in a distributed network, the fact that we have primary users in a distributed manner and the secondary users in a distributed manner, we have what we call the Poisson point process, which means that it's a 2D process where actually the primary users, secondary users will appear like a Poisson process. Okay, it's not the traffic. The traffic is itself a Poisson process, but the fact or the distribution of the users in the network, the deployment of the users, it belongs to a Poisson point process. Okay. So here we have a probability of available channels. It's a theoretical work that has been done actually in this case. And here we see the performance. Okay, so what it tells us? It tells us here you have the number of cognitive radio users. Okay, and here you have the throughput. Okay, so we see we try actually to maximize the throughput, but at the same time we see how the throughput is or how the throughput evolves or varies with respect to the number of cognitive radio users. So my question now is, if you increase the cognitive radio users, will your throughput increase or not? So the throughput is all the throughut here of the cognitive radio users. Of the cognitive radio users, the whole network. It increases at the beginning. It reaches a maximum, and then it decreases. So it increases why at the beginning? You know why it increases? So we have more cognitive radio users that are transmitting. So we have more throughput, and we don't have too many of them, so the interference is not that much. So when their number increases, we have more users, you have more throughput, but then it will reach a maximum, and then your interference will increase, you have the collisions, etc. Then it will decrease till it reaches zero when you have too many users, you have too many collisions, so you lose in terms of performance, and you lose also the slide here. So if you shake like this, I think it's a problem of the Mac here. It's not compatible, I think so. Oops. Okay, so this is exactly what happens. So you have a comparison between the protocol that has been proposed and the other protocol. So the protocol is actually very efficient. And it has been studied for many values for the traffic. Okay, so here we have some data in the slides. You can find them in the slides about the exact format of the frames. Okay. Here theoretical results also about cognitive radio throughut in non-saturated mode, which means that you have non-saturated means that the cognitive radio users also they have a Poisson process as well. Okay, so again the same trend. You have an increase in the throughput and then you have a decrease. But here the protocol it does better than the other protocols that have been proposed in the literature. So we have CMAC, that's the current protocol, and then you have CSMA CA, which is classical protocol, and another classical protocol as well. This is a similar analysis, but here with respect to the available channels, okay? Because you have a probability for the available channels, so again you have the same trend. These are some experimental results that also show that when your network size increases, actually your throughut. Here actually the first one is about the response time. When you so the response time actually increases because you have more nodes in the network. So to have it, the more nodes you have, the response time and the propagation of information about throughout all nodes actually will take some time. And the other one is simply experimental results, not theoretical. That's why the curves are actually segmented like this. Okay. So this slide shows the impact of cognitive radio traffic and cognitive radio transmitters on cognitive radio throughput. So it's a similar result as a function of lambda prime. Okay, and finally, this result is about the speed, okay, mobility. So as you see, you have here the number of cognitive radio users and then your throughput, but for different mobile speeds of the nodes. As you see, it's not really sensitive to the mobility, okay? All the curves are almost identical, which means that the system is really very, very efficient, even if there is mobility in the network. Even if the nodes move, still it works very well. Okay, so this is a very strong point here. This is another result where you have actually different number of hops. We consider that we have, for example, 2 hops, 3 hops, 4 hops, and we have the same trend, which means that if the traffic increases, you improve your performance, but then your performance will decrease because you have too much traffic and there are collisions. but when you vary your number of hops, actually your system or the trend will be very similar. Okay, so here I will make a summary and then we'll have a discussion. I talked about cognitive radio. It's a key technology for 5G. So all what we are doing here is, of course, the theme of the school is about 5G. Current technology will be essential in 5G architectures because we talked about so many applications and so many requirements and high data rates. So we need CRAN in 5G. And as I said, there are several challenges that need to be addressed through local control, dynamic access, cooperative architectures, and mobility support, which is actually a very important, or very important tool, because here it's one step towards cognition. Okay, it's not all. It's simply one step, but of course there is a lot of work to be done for cognitive networks. So here there are some references. This is a book about cognitive sensor networks. So it has many aspects actually of what I have discussed. And then the second book here, it will be in 2014, actually in the end of this year. It's about cooperative cognitive radio. And here we talk about the complete spectrum cycle. It's not just one topic or just sensing or sharing. It's a whole cycle of the spectrum. And then they have a paper here. Actually, it's a survey in the IEEE proceedings this month. Actually, I think the printed version is not yet out, but the version is of the March edition. So it's about multi-band cognitive radio. So here you have a lot of results and a lot of discussions. I had students who asked me about how to implement cognitive radio. Is it, in the multi-band case, is it just many single bands that are associated together, or just one section which is appropriate to the multi-band? So here, that paper actually answers that question. Okay. But also it makes surveys about single band as well. So the other one is about the MAC protocol that I talked about here. And then you have another paper about the fairness protocols. The other one is about sensor networks using cognitive approaches, which has been also implemented. And the last one is just cognition in wireless sensor networks. So really a general framework, and it explains the whole concept with some physical implementation. Okay, so let's have some discussion here and see if there are any comments. I think 12:30. When should we finish? 12:45. So we have 15 minutes to discuss. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Just one information. Juste pour les gens qui vont partir aujourd'hui, prière de faire check-out avant 1 heure. Hein, d'accord? Le check-out. Merci. Donc, et on a 15 minutes de discussion.
Okay. Merci. Donc, French, English, Arabic, Chinese. No problem. Yes, no problem. And everybody actually can answer. It's not. It's a whole discussion actually, and there are a lot of contributions, and many are working on that. Anyone who wants to address a remark or make an answer, comment to something, then you can. But not all the same. So go ahead.
What you want to show the maximum number of CR to maximize the throughput and use the previous calculator. And if the number exceeds this optimal choice, we don't use the throughput. So in order to maximize the throughput.
Yes, I think it's a good thing, which means that you choose the optimal value for cognitive radio users, and then you allow it to come, and if parameters change, you decrease it or increase it. The only problem is about fairness, okay? There will be some users that will not have access to the network. But it's true, because if you have too many of them, the whole performance will collapse. So rather stick with a given number, a limit that does not, system should not exceed, and then allow them. But the problem also is that you have an architecture which is, okay, so imagine, for example, because it's an ad hoc network, don't forget that. For example, you have this architecture. Okay, if you have this architecture, what will happen? And you decide just based on random access. For example, you say, for example, you have, let's say, a number, and you set a threshold, but these two did not exist. Initially, did not exist. So there is a lot of pressure from this to this, okay, because the distance is long. There is multi-hopping. And you say, I have 100 cognitive radio users, I will stop there. And then we have 2 that came in. So what we'll do, you will reject them, right? But actually, you rejected them, but it would be in your benefit, because it will reduce the load on this one, and then it will allow actually a good, good hopping there. Because if you have a single hop over long distance, it will consume a lot of power, because the fading is exponentially decreasing with distance. Okay, so the more hops you have, normally the better performance. But of course, it should not be too crowded, because these are also they are not simply hops, but they are also using the spectrum and transmitting using their own. But in this case, setting a threshold without a knowledge of the topology can be harmful. So the idea is good, but we have to adapt it to the location of the users. If there is a cluster, for example, we reduce it. If we don't have, we can measure the diameter of the cluster. If that diameter is, for example, below a given value, etc., then we admit, etc. So we can have that kind of mechanism. It's a very good idea, actually. Any other comments or remarks about this? It's a very recent topic, actually. There are some of these things actually in 2014 still. So it's really a very recent topic, okay? I didn't see papers that put together all the, like this multiband paper. It's simply, it's the only one or so far that actually puts all the multiband techniques in a single paper, in a single framework. Yes? So actually, here is surprisingly, yes, it's surprising. Yes, yeah, this mobility. So here actually you have all the curves that are almost identical. So when you do this in theory, it's not affected. Why? Because we have a motion model, because according to that motion model, we developed a theory, and the theory resulted in the fact that this system is not sensitive to mobility. But it doesn't make sense physically speaking. Okay, so that's what we got to struggle with the reviewers about this, and I'm happy that you asked, are you a PhD student? Oh, that's good. So I think you should have a very good future in the field. So actually, the problem of mobility is very important, and this is due to the model. If we have chosen, for example, a 3D model, the results may be different. Okay, so we have pointed that in the paper. Okay, And the second thing is that the experimental results, they are sensitive to mobility. I think because when you do experimental results, it's not theory, it's realistic. So necessarily will depend on mobility. I think here. You see here you have mobility in one of the curves. I think the blue curves have mobility. If you see in the legend, in the right, you have the second one is with mobility, and the first one is without mobility. Okay, so the curves here. So the two curves are not identical. Okay, which justifies what you said. Okay, so it's affected by mobility. Okay. So this one and this one are the same thing, but this one is with mobility. Okay, so the blue one is with mobility. Okay, it's not identical. So in practice, it's not identical. Okay, so I'm happy that you asked this question because it's very relevant. Okay. So this is experimental result, which means that the whole network has been simulated, and the RTS, CTS mechanism has been implemented and everything. But the previous results were just pure theory, and in theory you have to base your analysis on a model, and model was simple. Okay. Otherwise, if it is complicated, you probably will not be able even to develop that theory at all. So we were obliged to use it. Other remarks or comments or discussions? Yes? Yes, I think it's a good question, and it's an open research area. So security is a major issue in many applications and have to be addressed, but not in this case. In the book, there is a chapter about security. In the book, so that will appear at the end of this year. There will be a chapter of security. So we have many issues of security. For example, we have malicious users. That there are liars who say, for example, there is a spectrum, but the spectrum there is not, because there is sharing of information. Greedy users. So there are a lot of there are users that pretend just transmitting packets, flooding the network with packets that are not using. So actually, one method for security is that, for example, you give, for example, initially you have a new user, you give a label or a ticket to that user, okay? And then if you have a malicious, strange behavior, you degrade your level of trust, okay? Like, for example, you meet someone for the first time, you say, okay, everybody is nice, okay? Smiling, happy, and so on. But then you see that person is not very good and doing stuff that is not really appropriate. Then you say, this person is not should not trust this person. Your degree of confidence confidence will decrease from 100% to 90%. And you see another strange behavior with someone else. And your neighbor will tell you, well, I met that girl and she's not good. And you say, yes, that's true. So your trust to that girl or that person will be degraded from 90% to 70%, and you get another packet from someone else, and then etc. And then at the end you lose trust in that person, and you ban it from your list of cooperative users. Okay, this is exactly what happens in cognitive radio when it deals with security. You have users, and there is a label of trust and exchange of information about trustfulness, okay? And little by little that information gets propagated, and then the problem can be coped on. So this is one way to do it, but there are many other ways to do it. Yes?
When we discuss mobility, when we discuss mobility, there are many aspects that are beneficial with mobility and others that are drawbacks. For example, here you have an unevenly distributed secondary user network. And if these nodes are static, you can have bottlenecks here. And some nodes will be overstressed and probably will not be able to provide all the necessary throughput from one side to the other. So this is not beneficial for static. When these nodes move, you can probably get rid of the situation, which is due to the secondary user, secondary network itself. But you have also the dead zones or the forbidden zones due to the primary network. And if nodes move, probably they get out of the dead zones, and probably they will be able to communicate better. This is so mobility here is beneficial to get rid of these situations. You will not be in these situations all the time. But when you are mobile, probably the paths that you have established from one node to the last one, probably these paths will break too much, and probably you say, for example, one node is very well received, so he can transmit, but afterwards the other one goes further, and it will not be able to receive very with a good quality. So you have two aspects of mobility. And I'm wondering why you have almost the same results. Because you have many phenomena that can, in fact, be beneficial for one case and not for the other, or the other, and vice versa.
That's simply the theoretical model. It's based on, the random walk model, which is linear, a linear random walk model. So the mobility is only in one direction and doesn't change. So it's a simplified case. Okay, it's a simplified case, but also it's integrated over many iterations, many realizations. So it's linked to the probability distributions and so on. Okay, it's a random generation of nodes. So when you integrate that over many iterations, I think you come up with an average result. But of course, when you, as you said, if you on realization base, you have one realization of the network, you have a strong effect of the mobility because they are very distant together. But then in one other realization, because it's random, the mobility effect will be less because so. So on by one case it's different, but when you integrate all together, I think you get this case.
Okay, thank you.
So in this section you have discussed the use of cognitive radio principle in the ad hoc networks. My question is in 5G context, we have an aggregation of many types of radio access networks, notably the small cells networks and etc. So my question is, can the cognitive radio principle be used in such access radio networks?
Yes, the cognitive concept, I think it can be used, but it's difficult to implement. But if we still at least apply some principles of cross-layer design, it will be a very good thing. Now for cognitive radio, I think these kind of protocols will show up in 5G, which means RTS, CTS, ACTS, etc. Mobility support will show up because most, or as I said, the ad hoc networks are essentially an essential part of 5G. It's already here, and there are many applications. So we must provide solutions to it. 5G will be also a heterogeneous network, so we have many technologies, many challenges, and ad hoc will be part of it. like intelligent transportation systems, you have cars that are moving, but they can benefit from the presence, for example, of base stations, okay? If they are close to it. So it can be a heterogeneous network that benefits from that. Okay, so it's all open areas of discussion and
Thank you.
implementation. Okay.
My question here is why did you consider that cognitive radio is an alternative for cross-layer design? So what is your point of view? Why did you consider that it could be an alternative to cross-layer design?
No, cognitive networking, not cognitive radio. Okay, cognitive networking, which is actually the 8 levels of cognition. Are actually more general than cross-layer designs. Cross-layer design is simply part of it. It can probably go to level 3 or something, but it is part of it. So the more general than cross-layer design, it is the cognitive networking, not cognitive radio. Okay, cognitive networking. Okay.
What are the steps to cognitive network? Will 5G be
Cognitive.
cognitive network, or probably we need to wait for 6G or 7G?
I think we have to wait till some generations to come. But there are some aspects of cognition that are implemented. It's some intelligence and adaptability of the system to be implemented, especially with the concept of cloud networking, okay, or even cloud signal processing. Probably some signal processing aspects can be done on the cloud or cloud coding. Okay. So I think the idea comes and develops little by little. We had software-defined radio. Now it's intelligent platforms for cognitive radio. So things are evolving towards the general case of cognitive network or cloud networks as well. Okay, so probably the chairman is not here. See, Sofiane, تحب conclude the session as a chairman?
Ok, donc on remercie Mohamed pour cette présentation de qualité. Et donc, normalement, on va revenir l'après-midi avec Mohamed Slim Ladwini. Donc, le chairman est là. Ok, donc je vous remercie tous et à 14h. Merci.